Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Maker That Money, the podcast where we talk about turning your hobby into your jobby. I am Pooch of Repkord. I like the way that sounds. It's like medieval. I don't know what's that. With me, my good friend, Mr. Andrew Mayhall, founder and king extraordinaire of the Empire of Sticky. Andrew, how are you this fine Friday?
I'm doing great. A little tired, but
I mean,
got to get my energy levels up.
I feel like that kind of stuff just goes without saying these days. You run a small business, you run any
Yep.
business, and tired is just par for the course, right? So how about this? This morning we're just going to start with a minute of free time as people are trickling in. I just pulled my coffee from the
I could see you
the
like
microwave.
extracting the warmth out of it.
Oh man, on a cold day, it's really cold and rainy. We've got a what is it called? The Pineapple Express, the massive storm system that's coming through here.
Yeah.
That's just dousing us with rain and stuff. So it's
Oh,
a cold
man.
and rainy day, and it's
Yeah.
supposed to be for like the next week or so.
Oof.
So it's nice to just have
Winter weather.
my warm cuppa. It's not a cuppa the way Alex Gibson would call a cuppa. It's coffee. It's not tea. But good to see you and some familiar faces in the chat. Karen, good to see you. Mike from Never Let the Machine Win. So we've got our loyalists with us this morning. Our hardcore maker that moneyers. We need a better term.
Yeah, we need
MTMers. I don't know.
Yeah, MTMers. I mean, for Gloop, we just call them Gloopies.
I know. I mean, it's so perfect, right? You got Gloopies
so
when you drive up to the show in the Gloopy van, the Gloop van, the Gloopies swarm, and want signatures. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So we need something for MTM.
yeah. We'll have to come up with something. The hobby jobby people. A couple of housekeeping items. We're getting back into the swing of things for 2024. I feel like Pooch is finally starting to get his mojo back. It took a little bit. I don't know if it ever fully left, but
Recharge those batteries.
I'm waking up from my long winter's nap. The batteries are feeling like they got a little bit more charge. I'm excited for some initiatives. I've said no to a lot of things. I've said yes to some new things. I've started focusing on some stuff that I've put off for a long while. Still not taxes, but working toward that before Taxman cometh. Yeah, there's your PSA. But if you guys didn't notice, we just dropped a bonus episode from my travels in late November last year when we went to Form Next. I had the pleasure of getting to spend time with my friend Scotty Allen of the Strange Parts channel. He was very gracious and sat down with me and rambled on and on for like an hour and a half. It's a long one, but there's some interesting nuggets in terms of his origin story and what it takes to start a creator channel and business and stuff, which is always just so interesting and fascinating to me, and what his intentions were and how it, had a lot of times, like a lot of these creators have that common thread of they have no idea what they even had or where they were going with it. But the cool takeaway that I got is like, as far as a unique value proposition and what brings success consistently that I've found in creator world, and comment away if you disagree, is that unique selling point, right? What makes you different? Why are people wanting to watch your channel as opposed to the bajillions of others and more every day that are out there? And Scotty just had a really interesting, like, kind of right place, right time with, like, I'm going to travel to China. We don't see a lot of like that type of content a lot. There's not a lot of access, relatively speaking. I mean, there is, but like, going to China and talking about that story and how actually really interesting it was that, he was able to he was saying how surprised he was to just be able to like walk into a factory and be welcomed. And it was so exciting, and they will pull out all the stops and take you to lunch and do all kinds of interesting stuff. And it's like, but learning not to abuse that, because obviously they're very big on business and not knowing who you're dealing with. But when a giant Westerner walks in and is interested, like that's
Sure.
that's not something that happens every day. So anyway, check it out if you're interested. We just posted that. If you like that kind of content, I've actually got I think 3 more of those that are, I say, in the can. Really, it's just a function of me putting the quality audio onto just the wide video shot, so I can put it up on YouTube, but out on the podcast services as well. If you like that kind of thing, as I get to travel, it's a completely different dynamic to be able to sit down and talk with people personally that way. So hoping to share more of that. Just to tease, had a great talk at Smurf with Matt Denton, who is the Mantis Robot channel, and he's done all kinds of incredible stuff. His Mantis Robot, obviously, but the giant Lego go-kart. And he got to talk about how he hit his starts. He recently decided he was going to build a jetpack, like a legit jetpack. And everything that went into that. So that was cool. And then I got to sit down with Bill and Brittany Duran not too long ago. And they had just some great nuggets on like what it's like actually like running your maker business with your significant other.
Oh, yeah.
As designers. And I was really happy they were willing to share that experience, because it's not every day you get to hear from the power couples in Makerland. And they are one of them, and they're just a delight. And it was very nice of them to open up their home and allow me to do that as well. So that was cool. And then we got another interview with Thangs, with Dennis from Thangs, which is really cool as we talk about the state of the maker economy and all the things that are happening there. A lot of you guys that are in the chat are maybe interested in design, maybe have a printables club or a Thangs account, and you're doing memberships. Any of those, there's really cool opportunity, and more every day. So that's just yet another way to make money as a maker, which we talk about on this podcast all the time. All right, that's enough promoting ourselves for right now. Today, Andrew, we had some great conversation. We got to spend some time last week, by the way, together down in L.A. It's not, first of all, guys, let me tell you something. It's not often that Mr. Andrew Mayhall will hop on a plane and travel that way. But he's branching out. He traveled internationally.
I went out to Smurf.
Yeah. You're doing great.
That was fun. Yeah.
Right, flexing new muscles and getting out into the world, and you see firsthand like what a difference that makes when you show up in person. I've said this, I've said this multiple times. The power of going to these events and putting your face out there and letting people see your brand. You know what I mean? And that it's not. There's always people tied to this. I talk about it all the time. Like you get it too. Support emails. People that may be pissed off and they're just like, I'm going to send an email, and like they think they're just kind of shouting into the ether because that's what they've become accustomed to this day and age. And then you respond immediately and like, oh my gosh, I didn't think anybody was going to respond to me. Like there's a person on the other end of this business. And so that going to the events just really helps solidify that and that experience, and then people come at it with a completely different set of eyes. So that's cool.
No, it was fantastic, and I mean, always, it's always nice getting to spend time with you and our maker friends. We gotta see Winston
Moy down at Carbide 3D. That was really cool. That's my initiative. One of my initiatives this year is I'm gonna learn me some CNC, and that's kind of dipping the toe in, right? Because a CNC router is certainly a different experience than a full-on mill experience, but conceptually same idea. Just a function of tool set and power and all sorts of other stuff. So I'm excited. Probably gonna pick up one of them Shapeoko 5 Pros. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I got some stuff in the cart.
Doing some window shopping.
Doing a little Winston shopping with so we actually recorded some content too. I'm not sure if I'll drop that on this channel or somewhere else. I always like to, when I get out, the point was we got to spend some time together. We got to talk about things, and you had brought up. See, I've already rabbit holed, but I'm trying to bring it back to the title and what we're going to talk about today. You brought up a really interesting statement that I was like, oh, that's a cool way to put that, and that was, you got to figure out how to not just fail at a higher level. And I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah,
that's an
opportunity to fail at a higher level.
Yeah. And it was a really interesting way to articulate it. So we talked about that for quite a bit. We had some car time, traveling to and from Torrance and different places down in the
Mm-hmm.
the LA area, and you said that, and I was like, oh, that's cool. We got to talk about this more. So that's what we're gonna do today, and I want you to start off
All right.
by telling people what the heck does it mean to fail
Sure.
at a higher level, or an opportunity to fail at a higher level.
Sure.
What does that mean, and why
Well,
did we start
yeah.
talking about it?
So it actually came about, as many of our seasoned listeners will know, uh, 3D Gloop is not my first startup. This is my second go, and the first one that I was a part of, I founded it basically right in out of college, and it really started as me doing a lot of really cool research and being kind of that maker before maker was really a thing, if you will.
Mm, we didn't have
And
a word
I
for it then.
remember I was around 19 years old, I think, when I started really pursuing this. And I ended up raising my first $150,000 of seed capital to go out and build this idea that I had.
Okay.
And in doing so, you go through the pitch decks, you go through investor presentations, all of these things. And I know that during this whole process, one of the individuals that was kind of courting me, if you will,
Ooh.
in this whole process,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it was like, this is a really interesting opportunity. There's a lot of potential upside if you do this right, and all of these things. And I remember, kind of trying to temper expectations, saying that this was still a big risk. That while it's an opportunity, there's still a lot of chances for failure.
Sure.
And little did I know that, ultimately, that's what this was an opportunity for me to fail at a much higher level. And each time I would ratchet it up, through each successive, valuation and
Mm-hmm.
funding round.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of came about in that process of trying to build something from nothing.
Yeah.
Getting the correct people, social capital, working capital, intellectual capital, all of that together.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
really, I think what it comes down to is as an entrepreneur, we are constantly building whatever it is that we're building in our business, whether that is our intellectual property,
Mm-hmm.
and capital, whether
Yep.
that's our social and network capital, whether it's our actual capital. And we build these things up, and at some point we kind of pass these artificial levels, if you
Mm-hmm.
will,
Okay.
where we're operating at a different scale entirely. Gloop about a year ago hit a different level, where we had just unexpectedly started picking up growth, and day over day, and then week over week, we were breaking records, and then that continued. What used to be $100 a day turned into 500, and 500 turned into 1,000, and 1,000 turned into 2,000. You see where I'm getting this is these are levels.
Yes.
And the way that I've kind of been able to reflect on some of my past experiences is that at each level,
Yeah.
there's always that opportunity to fail. And you need to be careful in very, I guess, articulate in the decisions that you're making as
Mm-hmm.
an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean? Because, for me in my first startup, I threw money at problems. I threw people at problems. I wasn't thinking through many of these decisions.
Yeah.
And at each level, the risk for failure increased. And it was an opportunity, as now I call it, to fail at this higher level.
So let me
Um,
stop you for a second. Does
yeah,
the risk get higher, or is it the stakes that are just getting higher? Right? Because it feels like we're always at a. I mean, we don't want to make this negative. There's always the risk
mhm.
of failure, but
I think it's a
pressure
little bit of
the
both.
pressure
You know,
certainly increases as we
yeah.
add fuel to the fire, as it were.
The reason why I feel like it's potentially a little bit of both is
Okay.
because, again, as entrepreneurs, if we're not thinking through, again, how we are looking at our opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
they become bigger and bigger risks. especially if we're not thinking through the known knowns, the known unknowns, the unknown
What
unknowns.
do we know? We
Uh,
don't know. We
it-
know that we know. Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And these opportunities, while they might be tantalizing and exciting,
Hmm.
they can be some of the biggest risks that we're taking a gamble on. Like, for instance, let's look at open source for us as of last year.
Oh, that was a
Um,
good show. By the way,
we
if you're not
spent
familiar with Open Sauce, it's coming up again this
Mhm.
June. It's a rad combination of creators and makers coming under the same roof. Is that a good elevator pitch for that?
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
mean it's fantastic.
So we went to the first annual one together last year.
Hmm.
What happened?
Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing show, but for us, this was one of those opportunities to fail at a much higher level, in
Hmm.
the sense like we had to pull out every stop. We invested our entire marketing budget that we didn't even have
Yeah.
to actually make this show happen.
Yeah.
Tens of thousands, multiple tens of thousands of dollars
Yes.
to actually pull this thing off. And it was an opportunity, but also at the same time, it was us kind of transitioning to hopefully what would be the next level of the business.
Yeah.
And I think that it was a fantastic experience, and I do think that has been what has helped propel us to that next level. But that could have just as easily been a massive failure, and a massive gamble that it never would have paid off.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think really what it comes down to is understanding what the potential upsides are, understanding what the potential downsides are, looking for those known knowns, those known unknowns, and those unknown unknowns.
Well,
um
that's an interesting way to put it because it's like we're confronted with these decisions. It feels like on a daily basis. And again, sometimes the stakes aren't as high, right? And obviously,
Mhm.
when we're talking about money, that feels like we're just pushing all in again, right? And like I think the one thing I wasn't prepared for with my business as I bootstrapped and stuff was like the number of times that it felt like I was gambling, like I was
Mhm.
going, I don't think gambling is right because it's like you're hopefully making some calculated
It's yeah.
decisions,
It's not a gamble,
but
right? There's
you're
there's
like,
some momentum carrying you,
this
but
is a sizable and perhaps a non-healthy chunk of the budget that we're
Mhm.
going on, whether it's like investing in getting a product launched or whatever, or sometimes it's the death of 1,000 paper cuts where it's like I think I was guilty of spreading myself too thin, where it's like, oh, I want to do
Mhm.
that, I want to do that, I want to do that, I want to do that, and it's like all of those little chunks that took tranches of money along the way. Really created strain on the overall system as well. So
Mhm.
whether it's you're all in on one thing or there's multiple ways to kill yourself and fail in this line
Mhm.
of work, right? But
Yep.
carry on. So you're giving a great example of like this. This felt like a moment where you're like,
Mhm.
we're at a crossroads here potentially. If like this is going to pay off
Yeah.
or not. Um,
Yeah.
that's a one event. I mean, you go to a lot of events too, and it probably
Mhm.
wasn't an existential threat.
No.
Like there wasn't a failure by which you would have been out of it because that's a sunk
Mhm.
cost, right?
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
But
But
what do the analytics show in terms of your return on investment and that
exactly.
did it
Yeah.
pay for
Yeah, I mean,
itself?
I believe absolutely hands down it paid for itself.
Yeah, I think
Not
so.
necessarily directly in terms of revenue dollars in, but the number of relationships that we have been able to cultivate and continue to build after that. Many people probably have heard of Emily the Engineer. We've actually done a few projects, and we're looking forward to doing a few more cool,
Emily
awesome, crazy
is
projects.
so great on so many levels. I love it.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
so tickled to be able to like actually meet her and her husband in person and talk to her,
Hmm.
and her vibe is just
Yeah.
so perfect, right? The
She like
combination of
walks this
technical,
line of like complete and
yeah,
utter chaos,
yeah,
and just this
but
also
but
yet
goofy,
professionalism
but
and goofy
smart.
and like,
Yeah, go
yeah.
check her out. Go look up Emily the Engineer. She's got a prolific, well, all the channels. She's on
Hmm.
Twitch, on she's
Instagram,
mostly, I
all,
would say, Instagram, YouTube,
yeah,
and some TikTok. But
yep,
if you're not familiar with Emily the Engineer, go check her out.
yeah. So
I
yeah, I
am.
mean, it's relationships like that have really paid off.
Yeah.
But if I were to bring this back to where all of this I think started for me,
Hmm.
was my days at my first startup. Each time, we would raise more and more money, and we would have a larger cap table. We would have more investors. We had more dollars on the line. And, at some point, I can't pinpoint exactly where it came up, but I know that it was during an investor presentation, that I was giving, that it really kind of sunk in. And it's like, well, while this is an opportunity, this is, an opportunity to fail at a much higher level
Mm-hmm.
because of the risk, because of, what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to kind of pitch this as, we all have to be moving in one unison direction. Now, unfortunately, me being young and naive, there were many times where I didn't plan forward and think forward, and eventually, I lost control of that ship,
Mm-hmm.
and that's
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately kind of what led to its ultimate downfall. Multiple different issues, but one of those things that still resonates with me is that with each new level of this business, if you take it in a calculated approach, I
Mm-hmm.
really think it comes back to, this is just another opportunity to fail at a much higher level. The risks and the stakes are much higher.
Yeah.
And so you need to temper those expectations and, come at it from, a cautious, direction, if you will.
Sure.
Um,
Two.
and that might not be right for every business, but I think for me, it's really kind of built now into the DNA
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
3D Gloop. It's like I started this as a process to prove to myself that I knew what it takes to build a business, or I could learn what it takes to build a business
Right.
and make it sustainable and make it, build lasting value.
Sure.
Um, you know,
It's so first of all, thank you for sharing that history. I want to call out two comments in the chat. And for those listening back on any of the podcast platforms after the fact, we do try to stream live pretty regularly Fridays at
mhm.
9 a.m. Although moving forward, I think as we've decided to try to make this more sustainable, I think we're going to shoot for maybe bi-weekly or once a month at the very least.
Mhm.
So the schedule, again, may be variable, but if you do have the opportunity to tune into YouTube where we record this live, you can comment. And there's two that I wanted to pull out. The first was
Yeah.
from Nero, our friend. He says Nero 3D, the Canuck creator. He's just north of Detroit. He's practically American with how close he
Practically.
is. So we can just give him a pass on that. But he points out he blew the budget. Well, here's what I want to say. He says he blew the budget several times on things for the channel that didn't work out at all or even break even.
Mhm.
The thing that I find interesting about statements like this, because I hear this all the time and I feel like I've had the same feeling myself, and you probably feel like you've
Oh,
spent
yes.
money on things that just were a waste.
Mhm.
As a business owner, like that's such a tough thing because we're only used to equating things to our personal finance, and we look at how we spend our money
Mhm.
personally. I think completely different than you need to look at it as a business,
Mhm.
right? Because it's gonna feel like you're wasting money a lot
Mhm.
when you're doing that, and maybe you are, maybe you aren't. But the one thing I would want to point out is that for somebody like Nero, you're building a brand.
Yeah.
And so spending that money is investing in that time and energy of growing that brand. And so why it might not like be a complete one-to-one or obvious return on investment with a lot of stuff.
Yep.
Just the going through the practice of it, building it up. Maybe you recorded some content that never saw light of day with it, but at least you got some practice in. Like there is value, so you can't. My point
Mhm.
is you can't beat yourself up on what feels like waste. And it's not to say that you don't know, you may come back to it at some point too. Like a lot of
Mhm.
this is like latent value sometimes too.
Yep.
And at the very worst, maybe you end up selling some stuff and you lost half your money or whatever, but you moved on and you learned a lesson. So is
Mhm.
there value in that? What do you think?
Yeah, oh no, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that is always kind of crazy. Again, being an entrepreneur that has gone this bootstrap route now, the dollar values that we're playing with, and I say playing with because it feels like monopoly money. sometimes when we're dropping 20 grand on,
Yeah, it does.
packaging material
Yeah.
or boxes or something like
Oh
that.
my
And it's
God,
just like,
box money is the worst.
it's just like, are you kidding me?
Right,
One of
right.
the things that we're kind of like looking at is we over the course of, the year spent like $85,000 on postage. And it's just like when you really think about it, it's like that's a salary for that's a decent salary for someone.
It,
you know?
it is, but in the aggregate, when you're talking
Yeah.
about, a 3/4
Yeah.
million in sales or whatever the number is, like
Yeah.
that's actually
It's
like a
nothing.
small percentage. But I love
Yeah,
the notion
exactly.
that it's like it reminds me like, oh, Andrew's walking down to the post office and buying $85,000 worth of postage stamps. Is
But
what
that's
it
the
like it
thing.
kind of feels like, right? Because we
Yeah,
equate
that's
it
what
to
it
our
feels
personal life.
like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Which is exactly what
And
you did, right? You're
yeah.
putting postage stamps on each of these. God, can you imagine? That's terrible. Anyway,
Oh my god,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But I mean, it's interesting because going from going from that maker where you might be spending a couple $100 to owning your business, and it there's that weird feeling. It's like, well, man, I'm outlaying a ton of cash for this thing, for this
Mm-hmm.
this opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
for whatever it might be. And sometimes, yeah, they don't pay off right away, but I would agree with you 100% when it comes to building a brand. You're building something that is hopefully going to have a lasting value,
Yeah, yeah,
ideally if done correctly.
yeah,
And while it might not return right away, it will return at some point. And I think you put it so perfectly. It's like a latent value,
yeah,
in that it takes time to
yeah.
develop.
Mike
So
comments he has a house full of latent value. I think that's relatable to a lot of people, right?
I'm
Um,
sure, yeah.
but he did also point out the second comment that I wanted to draw attention to, which is the more investors equals more bosses thing. Now you can probably speak to this
Hmm.
because I couldn't have done what you did. I actually went as far for an earlier venture to like sit down with some VCs, but my partner and I at the time decided that that wasn't right for us because it felt like a lot of pressure. While they're not
Hmm.
necessarily like your boss, clearly people that are putting money into things want that money back and then some, right? And
Hmm.
so
Yep.
so obviously the more that you go through raising funds and the more like the more
Hmm.
people are pressuring like, hey, when's this gonna pay
Yeah.
off for me?
Well,
Tell us about
I
that.
mean, I think it comes back to, in any venture, in anything that you're doing, you have a fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders.
Love that.
Um, yeah.
You're such a
And what that
nerd,
means is,
Andrew.
you have to produce
Fiduciary
some sort of
responsibility.
return,
Yeah,
or you
yeah,
have
yeah,
to produce some sort of value.
yeah,
And while in many cases, small businesses, the shareholders are the owners.
yes,
If you were to go out and raise money, those are going to be your investors now. And while you might have a majority control,
mm-hmm.
those investors, in some cases, depending on the stock options that they have, might have preferred shares, they might have voting rights, they might have a lot of things.
Right.
And you have to be very mindful of the decisions that you're making. And these are some of the things that I know personally that I did not do very well because it was my first time and I was so young. Basically, I got way too many people involved, and I ended up losing control simply because I didn't know what I was doing. And probably I wasn't the right person to be leading the ship,
Mm-hmm.
but still at the same time, I had a fiduciary responsibility to produce returns for these investors. And, the moment that they feel like you are no longer capable of doing that, that's when, you're getting canned. I
Well,
mean,
it's interesting because well, first of all, people don't just well, they do, but it's not common. People don't just give money for out of the
yeah,
goodness of their heart, right? So when you're
yeah.
venture funding, obviously, like the trade off is I will give you some of my cash if you give me some of the equity of your company, and it
Mhm.
all that especially probably feels like monopoly money a lot of the time, where it's like, well, I got these
Mhm.
guys, and as a 19-year-old, that
Mhm.
has to feel incredibly rewarding that you know how rare it is for people to put real dollars behind something and put their trust in
Yeah.
somebody that's so young and inexperienced. So in a lot of ways that can really bolster your, I don't want to say ego, but
Yeah.
it can give you this inflated sense of what you're doing.
Mhm.
And we've seen this a little bit to maybe a lesser effect, but like I don't know how to quite title this right, but like when makers go to a fair or
Mm-hmm.
something for the first time, and you get that dopamine hit of like, that's really cool, I would buy that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you're
Yep.
like, oh, I've got a product here. Oh, maybe I can start a business. Oh, this will be easy. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
came, right? So it's like fallacy of success to some extent. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what to call it, but just because you're getting that reinforcement inside this very specific bubble does not mean
Absolutely.
that that scales. That does not mean that it's a great idea necessarily either, right? So it's like it's really hard to take yourself and get up to that 10,000 foot view of having context of the whole thing. Can you
Yeah.
speak to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it goes hand in hand with some of the other things we were chatting about, and you actually put it up in this form that I kind of really love how you packaged it. It was vanity metrics and startups.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, when you're going through the route of raising venture capital or whatever it might be, raising funds, you are all about those vanity metrics because
Oh
you're
my
showing growth,
gosh.
you're showing traction. They kind of instill, like every startup manual, every startup book, they instill the need for these vanity metrics,
I mean,
like and
especially in VC tech bro
mhm,
culture. I'm not
yeah,
kidding. It's
it's
a
number of
whole thing.
active users, it's
It's oh
number
my
of new
god. DAUs,
subscribers.
baby. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
it's annual reoccurring revenue, like like it's
Mm-hmm.
all of these
Mm-hmm.
things that build up this vanity. And while it's not ego, it's totally ego. I mean, I will
I'm
100%
not
say.
saying it's the ego, but it's the ego. It's the
Yeah,
aliens.
I,
Um,
I will I will 100% say,
yeah.
like, when I was young, I absolutely got a big head about myself. And I hate that. Now that I'm able to look back, I can see where, I was definitely caught up in all of that complexity of that, those vanity metrics.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think in many cases, it's taking a step back and having to remove, like, that from yourself, and really think about building something that is more sustainable. And because again, like, these vanity metrics, like, while they're really cool and impressive, it all comes back to, well, that's just again another opportunity to fail at a much higher level, because as those numbers go up, as your presence comes up online, as you're touting and shouting at the other startups around you, oh, look what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think now I really see it's just, okay, yeah, it's a lot of noise,
Yeah.
and you still have the same opportunity of failure.
Yeah.
you know
Well,
it's just what level you're at.
when I brought up vanity metrics when we were talking about this as in prep for the episode and stuff, like I feel like this is very intimately tied to like my learnings from 2023 last year, and
Hmm.
what I want to try to do different this year as I have kind of a different perspective on stuff. And so just in talking about, like, let me point out some of the vanity metrics that I feel like are super common. You already mentioned, well, you said ARR,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
revenue is like that number that people throw out. We hit $1 million in sales. We hit 2 million, whatever that number
Hmm.
is, because it sounds impressive. But when you go like, yeah, but how much of that was profit? Oh, we're not profitable yet. Oh,
Hmm.
no, it's not. So when we talk about failing at a higher level, a lot of times it's like you're just adding zeros at some
Yep.
point to the end of the thing. It's like
That's exactly it.
you're not, yeah. It's like maybe the numbers are getting $1 million, but your costs like go up,
Mhm.
substantially too, and that balance is oftentimes really out of whack as well, because like you can operate really lean when you're
Mhm.
so what is there has to be, and I'm not like great with the accounting structure and stuff, but like some metric of the actual efficiency of the investment to
Mhm.
return, where it's like, and I would argue that as you scale up your number of people, which I
Mhm.
think is also a vanity metric, and I'll get to that in a sec. That efficiency, that operational efficiency goes down. It inherently goes down,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And so, yeah, fine, you had $1 million in revenue, but like you had maybe $5 grand in profit, which is
Mhm.
nothing. Like VC wouldn't touch a return like that, and frankly, you're
Mhm.
wasting your
Well,
time for something.
they
Well,
they
well, well,
wouldn't they would at the
well,
start.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but
You know,
that's
it
not a good return at all, right?
no,
But
no,
nobody ever
no, of course
shares
not.
that metric, or
Yeah.
more rarely is it?
Well, and so that's the issue, right? You've highlighted the whole crux of the issue when it comes to raising money. Like my first startup, we were building server computer appliances. These were big, expensive machines, lots of R&D.
Ooh.
Like we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in R&D in a single year.
Mhm.
We had engineers basically working on designing, whatever it was, custom wind tunnels to test our custom engineered heat sinks and thermal dissipation devices. Like
That sounds like
tons
it
of
could get
money.
really pricey really fast. Yeah.
And we weren't returning anything.
Right.
We
Right.
it was
It's
it
all for
was
the
if you really
promise.
yeah, if you really look at it, we were just spending money. And it was just spending money with more and more and more zeros. So at some point, we were like, oh, hopeful that we would have the product ready. It was going to be commercializable and like we could start selling. But
Or that you were going to get acquired, which is a whole nother. I
exactly.
mean, there are
It would,
literally like people that are looking at stuff like if I can get in early enough and this can get
hmm
successful enough that another company is just going to want to absorb them,
hmm
that
Yep.
can make you desirable as well. But you bring up an interesting point that there is a metric that is commonly talked about in VC land that is probably useful, and that would be burn rate, right? So
hmm
the amount
Yep.
of cash you're burning through. I mean, it's exactly
Yep.
what it sounds like.
Yep.
Uh, so
Yeah.
were you constantly being, scrutinized for what your burn rate was as you were
I
going, or?
mean, sort of, but I mean, given that the thing that we were doing, it was kind of expected. And what's funny is that most investors, when they invest, they anticipate you spending through the money faster than you present,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
things costing way more,
yeah,
and you needing more money.
yeah.
And so you get into this cycle of constantly having to raise more money,
Right.
and in order to reach that profitability. And so, you keep ratcheting up the stakes, you keep ratcheting up the risk. And it's a house of cards that you're essentially building that are all built off of these ridiculous vanity metrics.
Hmm. Hmm.
Hence, again, this is just another opportunity to fail at a much higher level. You're just adding zeros and you're not actually building something sustainable.
Yeah.
You're not building something that is producing value
Let's
at this point.
let's talk about the other vanity metrics that are probably more relatable. Well, I don't know. I think it's relatable across all lines of business, but and there's a lot of people that'll probably take issue to my hot take that it's a vanity metric, but it's 100% a vanity metric in my opinion. The number of employees you
Hmm
have, the number of people involved, and it's not to say that I think that that's commonly used as at least some baseline of understanding like the scale of your business, right? Like when you're filling out these brochure, or, these applications to go to events, or like what size company are you? They
hmm
base their understanding of the size of your company, and typically they think, okay, well, a company that's got 10,000 employees obviously has got a lot larger of a marketing budget and stuff like that than a 1 to 5 a small business, or 1 to 100.
hmm
But as a small
Yeah.
business, like we take pride in the fact that like growth is represented by the number of employees that work for us.
hmm Yeah.
One of the pitfalls I would argue, at least in maker land, that we often fall into is like we really quickly realize there's so much stuff that we don't want to be doing, and so we probably
hmm
hire too quickly.
Yeah.
Like I fell into that trap.
I mean, I feel like I haven't hired quick enough.
And you actually you're on the flip side of that, right?
Yeah.
But
And
I mean that's good. I think you also have a lot of learning from
I
past experience
I was gonna say,
that
I
has
think
got you that way.
that really stems from building out a team of a bunch of, I mean, this is gonna sound really harsh, but useless individuals. Not that they were actually useless,
Right.
but at
Right.
at the scheme and scale that we were doing, like, and operating, like, it didn't make sense to have those people because, again, it was all of those vanity metrics, like, oh, hey, we have an engineer who's designing our wind tunnels, we have an engineer who's designing our PCBs, and we have
Mhm.
another engineer who's assembling them, and we have another engineer doing X, Y, and Z, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And so like the architecture of the actual structure of the company didn't really make sense. But
Yeah.
you know in many cases, I think that, yes, it is a vanity metric, and it's one of those things that, as a small business, it is a rite of passage too. I think it's like, you have to grow, and at some point, you need to be proud of what you've built.
Mhm.
And that is the people that you now have working with you, and the sales that you're generating. It's just how you're going about presenting it, I
Yeah.
think.
And it's tough because the tendency, I think, when you're going through growth or some degree of success is just by the same method of like we
Hmm.
need to throw money at the problem. We tend to throw more people at the
Yep.
problem because we feel overwhelmed, and it's a very reactionary
Hmm.
thing. I don't think we step back and think like, what is the actual purpose of this hire? What is like we may be going through a massive like seasonal demand thing right now,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
So can I can certainly hire people for seasonal help, but did I do that? Did I go to a temp agency and just say, "Hey, I need somebody for 3 months," or did I do the hire thinking, assuming the success and that I would just figure out what I was going to have them do
Hmm.
on the lean times? In the United States, I think we have more of a luxury as businesses that we have like at will employment and the ability to just kind
Yeah,
of
most
like
states.
scale
Hmm.
up and down. As painful as that is, as a maker, I'll tell you this that I've never looked at people as a disposable asset the way that I think a lot of business does. It sounds like a terrible thing to say,
Hmm.
but at the level that you're talking about, investors and stuff, it's like it's just a way of the world. It's like if
Hmm.
you have the work, if you need more, if you got a ton of business, you need to put more people in, and then when there's no business, you lay people off, and that's just the
Yep.
the culture. We
It's the
see the
cycle.
layoffs and all that stuff. It's not that way in the rest of the world. There's a lot of actual like labor protections and stuff. In fact, in the work that I do with Prusa, learning about the
Hmm.
labor laws in the Czech Republic. And just because you don't have work for them is not a legitimate reason to lay somebody off there. And so
Hmm.
that creates a different culture and, frankly, a healthier culture in a lot of ways because it allows them to kind of forecast and think about, like, okay, we take our hiring
Hmm.
seriously. If I'm going to hire this person, I need to make sure I've got enough stuff for them to do
Hmm.
while I'm there. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting thing, and it's something where I would argue, like in American culture, we're actually kind of dysfunctional.
Hmm.
The way
Oh
that
yeah,
we treat we not kind of we are dysfunctional in my
we
opinion.
are absolutely.
If you guys are with us in the chat, I'm going to take the opportunity. We're talking about vanity metrics. We're talking about failing at a higher level and stuff like that. If you've got an idea, like what's a vanity metric that you feel like you hear people throw out as a business all the time that maybe we haven't touched on yet? Tell us in the chat.
Hmm.
Other thoughts on hiring, Andrew, and the vanity metric of people?
I mean, one of those interesting things is like right now we are in the process of, basically getting our own space. And, that is looking like we are going to build a building.
Hmm.
A whole facility for our operation simply because of the
Just go whole hog, man.
like, yeah, no, it's simply because of all of the equipment that we need, all of the, everything that
Wait a
it
minute.
comes down
I'm
to,
gonna call you
you
out.
know.
Last week you said you were gonna rent some space. Like
Well,
you're not
we
even gonna
we are.
transition. Okay, all right, all
Yeah,
right.
yeah, no, so but that's my point is when we actually started talking, like when I started talking with the individuals that I needed to be talking with, like maybe they were community leaders, maybe they were real estate agents, the building companies. It's like, well, hey, we're planning on a 10,000 square foot facility.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, you guys are two people. Like you don't need that. And it's like, no, but I'm planning and banking on my success. I've been doing this for 5 years now. We hit some amazing milestones.
Yep.
We're now producing, a decent amount of revenue that can actually pay for these things.
Yep.
So, this is the time where I take it up a notch.
Right.
And so, this is where it's like, okay, yeah, I probably should have hired a long time ago. And it shows right now. Many
Yeah.
people can't buy our products without like a 1 to 2 week wait time, and
Yeah.
it sucks simply because I can't produce it fast enough and I can't get it out the door fast enough. I know that I should have done better there. And so, also at the same time, it's like
Maybe.
now I've got
Maybe
this
not.
parallel process
Yeah.
of renting a space. I've got to get a space rented so that I can do fulfillment, so
Yeah.
that I can get those products out, so I can get some help in. So there absolutely is some vanity to it, but I think also there's some there's like this um kind of judgment that happens when
Mm-hmm.
you're talking with other companies, like on
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing, like how serious they take you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For sure.
And so like what when I say we're two people, but then when they actually dive in and they see what we've done and what we've accomplished up to
Yeah.
this point,
Yeah.
you know, it changes their mind completely,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Karen Chow asks in the chat, would you consider follower counts on social media vanity metrics? I think there's a lot of creators that would say, especially now, like, yes, like the number of
Mhm.
subscribers and followers just doesn't have the same meaning that I think that it once did. And I
Mhm.
think, and listen, we're not content creators and stuff, but I can just parrot a lot of what I hear in the friends
Mhm.
that I interact and the colleagues I interact with that are creators. Um, Going to short form content and some different styles of media rather than like what we've seen. I'm speaking just specifically to YouTube at this point. When you look at followers and subscribers on there, that really kind of changed things because you could jack your engage your follower count really quickly by just getting short form content out there, and it's changed the way that creators have started making and doing stuff, right?
Mhm.
Moving away from all these like long release cycle productions to like it's just a get stuff out there, build your brand and all that stuff. And so I think the ones that seem to be doing it best are like the 1-2 punch because there's more money as a content creator in long form.
Mhm.
It's all about view minutes, right? So if you've only
Yep.
got a couple seconds on a short, like nobody is getting paid for shorts the way that you would get paid
Mhm.
historically. But I think the thing that's very clear to me, and I'm surprised that it doesn't get talked to even more, is like there are only more and more people coming into these things now and in diluting the pool. Like YouTube doesn't delete old videos. Like it's retaining. There's just an exponential growth of the amount of content and competition for view minutes out there.
Mhm.
And at some point we hit some critical, there's only so many eyeballs to view and all that stuff. Arguably, I don't know if we're anywhere near that. There's people that are digesting more content probably than ever. COVID was probably wacky
Mhm.
for that because we were sitting around watching a lot more YouTube videos and stuff like that. But to get back
Yeah.
to the question, is it a vanity metric? uh yes, I think it can be. It's a sense of scale, and you won't get taken seriously for sponsorship dollars and the way to like really unlock your brand, in
Mhm.
my opinion, to like get sustainable money to a
Mhm.
successful level until you hit certain vanity metrics, because that's all advertisers kind of had to go by, right?
Mhm.
But
Yeah. So
but so yes and no, maybe. I don't I don't know if I answered that question. What do you think?
I mean, I think yes. I mean, let me use a here's a real world example that literally just happened earlier this week.
Tell us.
We got, I was approached about sponsoring, I think, a giveaway and, also some potential projects, from an individual.
Yeah.
And they started touting their number of download metrics and, the number of followers that they have on the various different sites, without necessarily providing a link directly to it. And so upon doing some research, like all of these numbers sounded great. It's like, oh yeah, they might have, 50,000 downloads on a particular site with, a
Sure.
bunch of things, but exactly what is it? And upon doing more research, the things that they were doing didn't really align with what our brand and our products are useful for.
Sure.
And also at the same time, they had a massive flood of different models, and they were trying to ride different viral waves. And so in this case, it absolutely was a vanity metric that was trying to be used in a way in which, hey, you know sponsor me, do this or do that because I've got these numbers. And
Yeah.
while those numbers are great, like when it actually comes down to, does it provide any value? It, not really, not for us, maybe for someone else.
Yeah. And
um
just because
you
you're
know
getting views too does not mean that those are convert. Like TikTok is
mhm,
a great example. TikTok is a views monster. It's a machine. But like
mhm.
when you look at the average demographic, and again, I'm speaking in generalities here, so don't
Generals,
don't
yeah.
don't blow me up on this. But like that crowd skews a lot younger, doesn't have a ton of disposable income, isn't actually spending. So they might find what you're doing interesting. They might shuffle that way. So if you're looking at it to like invest in your brand, if that exactly what Andrew's saying, like what is your
Mhm.
goal? Is your goal to
Yeah.
like convert to sales immediately and that's how you're judging success? Or are you investing in the long term, like brand building, like we're going to be here in
Mhm.
10 years and when you're ready to buy, I want you to buy Gloop because you
Mhm.
saw it and I got in
Yeah.
your head early. Those are totally you know,
Totally different
different
things. Yeah.
things, different things. And so again, that maybe there's some latent value. Obviously, that's what like long tail branding is. Like that's what buying Super Bowl ads and billboards are. Like it's not necessarily like, you know, to
Yeah.
convert immediately, but just to always be in front of mind. And that's a luxury of success typically. Like you don't have a marketing department that can to do that. But oh, hey, Hendrick's with us. This is so for shout out to Hendrick, our favorite German electroplater. Thanks for joining us. If you guys aren't familiar with his work, go check out his channel. He does some really rad stuff where he, especially in the world of 3D printing, and then his coating 3D prints with like really cool shiny bits of metal like gold, and he gave me some gold and copper and silver stuff that he'd made.
I got a gold plated benchy that I have on my lab coat now. Like,
yeah. So Hendrik, I got a question for you while you're in the chat. Like, I know that you do when we spoke last, you know, like this is an enjoyable, fun hobby for you and stuff, but like you obviously get a lot of great response and reaction. We talked about this earlier. Does that make you think about wanting to sell a lot more of this stuff, or would that kill the idea of what makes it fun for you as a maker? I mean, this is what we love to talk about all the time, and it's, guys, you got to be honest with yourself. Like, it's totally fine if you're here because you're a hobbyist, like, and have no interest in making a job out of it, because that sucks a lot of the passion. But honestly, like, we want to talk about it. We want to share these experiences so that people can have the perspective and ask themselves the right question. Just because I can doesn't mean I should. So you have to. That's a very personal question that you have to answer for yourself. We'll see if Hendrik decides to share his.
Yeah. I mean,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, you know, I know, like, you know, we talk about this a lot, and you know, I know that personally, like, I always feel like there's so many other projects and products that I could come up with, and like, I always want to go and chase that shiny object. And
Yep.
you know, as a maker, like, I feel like we all think that, like, hey, I can turn this into a business, and we would love nothing more than to do that in many cases.
Yeah.
And that's also okay. You
Yeah.
know, it's also okay to fail, because that is what learning is all about.
There you go.
So,
And Hendrik
you know,
responds in the chat, that would kill the idea for me. Never sold anything, always kept it as a hobby. And I have a lot of respect for people that have the presence of mind to just be like, this is what I enjoy. I don't need to make money. And that's totally fine. That is totally fine. And in fact, I think that creates an interesting position for you, and gives you a level of authority. If maybe you're having fun and like sharing the content and all that stuff, that gives you some good clout and status, where it's like, look, I don't do this for money. I just share it because it's something I'm passionate about. When your passion comes through that way, I think that just earns a lot of respect in the community around that, and it's awesome. And I'm glad I finally got to see and meet you in person just this last year. It's awesome to make that connection. Another great creator jumping. We just got the creators jumping in. Stefan, good to see you. Greetings from Germany, and hello, Emmy, sweet Emmy, his daughter. She is amazing. It's good to see you. All right. We've covered a lot of ground, as we often have. We got about 10 minutes left to close out the hour. Any more like closing thoughts, parting thoughts on the growth and the vanity metrics piece, and you know, let's bring it all home. Let's bring it all home.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think I would want to reiterate, you know, that in many cases, you know, the opportunity for failure is literally always around you. You know, another like great analogy that I like to use here is, you know, in the startup, you know, especially bootstrap, you're locked in a room with fire literally always around you, and in many cases you're switching from you're switching from which is the closest fire to put out. And you know, and it's so easy to get distracted, where, you know, you see a fire in front of you but there's no fire behind you, and moving the, you know, you think that I need to move forward, and in many cases sometimes the exit's right directly behind you. So I think really it comes back to looking around and understanding and trying to get a different perspective, you know, on everything that it is that you're doing, you know, so that you can perhaps think through things a little bit sooner or a little bit longer. Many cases, I think I know for me, I would just try and solve the problem immediately. I would react instead of actually sitting down to think, like, is it something we even need to solve? Is this the right direction to go?
I think that's a very maker mentality too. I'm the same way. It's like we just like see a problem and we want to fix it, right? Like
Mhm.
we love addressing issues. We love problem solving, and that's frankly a lot of what energizes us, right? Like we keep saying like
Mhm.
the things that we need to be doing, the repetition cycles and stuff that feels boring to a maker, but like it's what needs to be
Mhm.
done for business a lot of times. And so we probably start like trying to put out fires or do things
Yeah.
because like that feeds our little like problem solving need and whatnot. But you pointed
Mhm.
out something and you articulated it so perfectly, and I want to just like reiterate that sometimes the best path forward is actually going to be moving backwards, or sometimes
Mhm.
your closest exit is behind you
Mhm.
in the airplane, as they like to share, right? Like
Yep.
don't immediately just like get these blinders on and feel like I have to be going this way, I have to hire more people, I have to raise
Mhm.
more money, because it's not true. I will tell you, sharing from
Mhm.
my personal experience, and like this, it felt really hard for me to like come to terms with the fact when I went through some downsizing last year that it didn't feel like failure.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah.
only now that I'm coming out and being like, you know what, thank goodness, like it almost like needed to happen for me,
Mhm.
because like it made me confront some interesting demons in terms of, it's like I correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you could probably, but I'm a people person, right? And so like I
Yep.
love interacting with people and stuff. But that
Yeah.
does not mean that I am a good manager of people, right?
Yep.
So one of the, it is, this probably sounds stupid obvious to a lot of you people, but it's just like, okay, people person, I have people skills. Um, sure, I can manage people and stuff like that. Nope, totally different. You're flexing a lot of different muscles. It was adding a lot of stress and misery and all this stuff. And so in a lot of ways, kind of the lean times were a blessing in disguise for me, because it forced me to make some tough decisions and evaluation, and also realizing that like I was guilty of getting on that treadmill. It's like we were flirting with
Mhm.
like our $1 million revenue year and all this stuff, and like yeah, probably could have kept going, but like if you looked at the profitability, wasn't that great. And if
Mhm.
you looked at my stress levels, it was off the chart, right? So it's like
Yep.
balancing that with the health. Like it doesn't do anybody any good if you give yourself a heart attack or a stroke and you're not around to,
Mhm.
succeed.
Yep.
So you have to have some honest impression on that, and a view of that, and it's so hard to take that step back and look at that when you're
Yes.
in it.
Ab- Absolutely. And one of the things, like, I don't know why this just came to me, but for those that watch that show Silicon Valley, it's fantastic. But
So good.
when he's trying to raise money, and he's getting offers left and right, and it seems like everyone wants to give him money to build up,
Yep.
the Pied Piper. Um, it never occurred to him that he could just ask for less. And instead of asking for the highest value
Yeah.
that you can get, the highest valuation.
More,
And
more,
I
more,
remember
more.
that scene where he talks to another founder that failed, everything blew up, and he's like, could we just ask for less? And he lost it.
What?
He's like, why
What?
didn't I think of that? Like,
Mind
and
blown.
it wasn't until after I had my own failure with that previous startup where I realized it's like that that is exactly it. I should have asked for less. I should have done less, because it was on that treadmill, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so again, it all comes back to understanding that as your business continues to increase at the level and scales and all of these other things, like just because you think that you have this decision or roadmap doesn't mean that it's necessarily the right one. And it's always good to take a step back and really think through instead of just react.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you were saying it was like ready, fire, aim.
Oh yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like
We ready, fire, aim all the time, right? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Just to kind of close the loop, or not close the loop because it's an ongoing story, but it's like I can 100% tell you. You mentioned earlier like having a lead time and people like having how much it feels like it sucks when you have customers that want to buy that you probably lose because you can't
Hmm.
fulfill the order. And yes, that can suck, but like my perspective on that has actually changed dramatically. Like I am the only one in the shop now, and I'll go in and pack orders, and like I let people know I'm like, hey, I'm a solo operator. I get to. It's gonna take me a little time, and I think that's disappointing to some. And yes, I probably have lost a lot of sales as a result of it, but like it's allowed me to heal and be less stressed and to find more balance in my life. And it doesn't feel like it's always going to be this way. It's like as I go through this, it's like I'm learning, I'm focusing a lot better. I'm deciding if like stuff is a good choice or not. I cut a lot of things that just weren't that were just fires that were being put out or not particularly profitable, and so it's I think going through these expansions and contractions can be a good thing. Like I am hopeful, and I'm confident that I will scale back up again, but it'll be a completely different thing when I do. The strategy and the approach and the sustainability, and I want to make sure that when I do bring people in, that I have a good plan for them being like invested in the long term and the way I treat them and making it feel sustainable. I lost one of my guys because like I couldn't offer healthcare, and I was competing against other companies. I just wasn't at the scale. Because he was hired on like for what was meant to be a part-time job. And that's fine too. Like at the given point in time, like I was not expecting him to stay around for 4 years. And yes, like it was painful losing him, because it's painful losing anybody that has like kind of institutional knowledge and knowing you're going to have to go through a retraining process and all that stuff.
Yep.
But, if and when I do it again, I think I'm going to come at it with a completely different set of eyes, and hopefully that just gets us to a better place in the long term. So just because you're in the mix now and feeling like you're paying, like I was hearing you say like, oh, I blew it, I have to work harder and all that stuff. I'm like, yeah, it's not as bad a thing as you might think to have a little bit of a lead time and to make people wait, because the customers that you want are going to be willing to wait. It's how long does this problem go on, and what are you doing to address it, to fix it so that you can capture it? You don't want to burn yourself out like trying to chase after every order, even though that's the feeling like I think a lot of us have early on.
Yep. No, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we covered a lot of ground, as I like to say. I think there's a lot of stuff. I hope that this is helpful to you guys that are listening back. I mean, disclaimer as always, we're in the midst of it. Who knows what, the future may bring, but we are happy that we have the opportunity and the time to get to share these stories with you. And we love the interaction that we get. So we thank you guys for spending your Friday morning with us, or evening, or wherever in the world you might be, in your commentary. And we look forward to doing another one soon. So it could be Friday. It could be, in 2 weeks. You never know. You never know. We like to keep you guys guessing. Keep the demand up. But follow, if you're not already following Maker That Money on X or Twitter, that's where we do the bulk of our announcements for the time being. And keep an eye out on the your podcast feeds for some of these bonus episodes that I'm talking about, because we got some real bangers coming out. That's it for today. I have been and continue to be Pooch of Repkord. Andrew, 3D Glooper extraordinaire. Thank you, my friend, as always. Great chat. And I look forward to doing the next one. Till then, goodbye, everybody.